the two of us.
Tell me, what?
So she had just had Mamie, and we were at her apartment, and she said, I want ice cream. I said, okay, cool. I said, but it's kind of a dangerous neighborhood, and it's night. And she said, no, it's like between Chinatown and Little Italy, what could happen?
There are artists who act, and then there are artists who transform, who step into a role not as an imitation, but as a rebirth, reshaping themselves so completely that audiences forget the person and see only the truth. Meryl Streep is the rarest kind of performer, one whose presence on screen feels less like entertainment and more like revelation. She has been called the greatest actress of her generation, a woman who redefined what it means to embody another life, another voice, another soul. But behind the elegance of her craft, behind the unshakable calm that she radiates, lies a journey far more fragile, far more human, far more haunting than the legend suggests. For decades, the world has known her as the immaculate chameleon of cinema, able to shift accents, identities, and emotional worlds with an ease that defies logic. We see her as Margaret Thatcher enforcing iron will, as a mother surrendering her child in Kramer versus Kramer, as a woman torn apart by tragedy in Sophie's Choice, as someone who carries entire histories in her eyes. But what the public rarely sees is the quiet vulnerability that shaped her long before glowing reviews, before golden statuettes, before she became the benchmark against which all actors are measured. This story begins in the silence between breaths, in the spaces where confidence faltered, in the places where Meryl herself questioned whether she belonged. Fame was never her dream. Attention never fueled her. She did not enter the world of acting to be idolized, to rise above others, or to claim a throne. She entered because something deep inside her understood that storytelling, real storytelling, was a doorway to meaning, a doorway to connection, a doorway to understanding the very ache of being human. But behind every triumph, there was loss. Behind every award, doubt. Behind every transformation, a small fracture inside her, quietly widening as expectations grew heavier. Because greatness, true greatness, is not a crown, it is a burden. And Meryl carried that burden even when it felt too heavy to lift, even when she wondered if she could live up to the world's belief in her extraordinary talent. This documentary does not worship the legend. It reaches past the surface, past the headlines, past the polished images of red carpets and standing ovations. Instead, it uncovers the woman who stood alone backstage, terrified she wasn't enough. The woman who once considered leaving acting altogether. The woman who learned that grief could strip her bare, and that only through art could she begin to heal. Before she became a universal symbol of excellence, she was a young woman searching for her place, wondering whether her voice mattered, fearing the world might never truly understand her. And in those quiet internal battles, long before fame softened the edges of her doubt, the foundation of her artistry was built. Because Meryl Streep's genius is not her mastery of accents, it is not her flawless technique, it is not her unmatched range. Her genius is her ability to feel deeply, achingly, truthfully, until that feeling becomes a bridge between her and the audience, pulling us into emotional landscapes we didn't know we were capable of entering. This documentary will follow her through the early uncertainties that shaped her, the heartbreaks that nearly broke her, the rise that she never sought, the shadows that came with success,
and the legacy that now towers over modern cinema like a lighthouse, guiding, warning, illuminating. To watch her life unfold is to understand that greatness is carved from struggle, from loss, from the fragile threads of self-belief that survive long enough to become something unshakable. As the lights dim and the story begins, we leave behind the myth of Meryl Streep and step closer to the woman behind the legend. The woman who has carried decades of characters inside her chest. The woman who paid a quiet price for extraordinary art. The woman's journey proves that even icons are shaped by the shadows they overcome. This is the story of Meryl Streep, not the superstar, not the icon, but the soul behind them both.
Origins and family roots. Before the world knew her as the immaculate force of nature who could transform into anyone, Meryl Streep was simply Mary Louise, born on June 22, 1949, in Summit, New Jersey, into a family that carried equal measures of gentleness and unspoken expectation. Her mother, Mary Wilkinson Streep, was the kind of woman who believed fiercely in her children, a quiet storm of creativity and intuition who once dreamed of performing herself. And her father, Harry William Streep Jr., was an analytical, soft-spoken pharmaceutical executive whose steadiness acted as both anchor and boundary. Meryl grew up between these two polar worlds, art and logic, dreams and restraint, expression and silence. In the golden stillness of suburban life, the young girl who would one day captivate the world had no sense of her future. She wasn't born gifted, she wasn't born extraordinary. She was born observant, watching, listening, absorbing the tiny emotional tremors of the world around her. Even then, she sensed things others overlooked, the trembling edge of insecurity in her mother's voice, the quiet pride beneath her father's calm, the small, fragile battles fought inside every human being. She filed them away without knowing that one day they would become the tools of her craft. Her ancestry stretched across Germany, England, Switzerland, Ireland, a mosaic of cultures, identities, and histories that gave her a sense of being many things at once. Perhaps that was the first seed of her ability to transform, the instinctive understanding that identity itself is fluid, layered, and influenced by countless forces we never fully see. But the Streep household, though loving, was not a sanctuary free from pressure. Meryl's mother believed her daughter was destined for brilliance, and while her faith was nurturing, it also cast a long shadow. Imagine being a child growing up with someone constantly telling you that you were capable of greatness, not because you demanded it, but because they saw something in you that you couldn't yet comprehend. It is a blessing and a quiet weight. Her father loved her deeply, but encouraged practicality, urging her to pursue something stable, something certain, something the world would understand. Acting was not that. Art was not that. And so Meryl spent her early years caught between possibility and reality, between the encouragement to be extraordinary and the expectation to be sensible. The roots of her emotional depth were planted early. Family gatherings taught her the rhythm of human interactions. Church choirs taught her the cadence of voice and harmony. School halls taught her about the masks people wear to survive their youth. And somewhere in those long afternoons and bustling classrooms, she learned to mimic, not for attention, but for understanding. She studied the way people spoke,
the way they held their pain, the way they hid their longing. Mimicry became empathy. Empathy became power. But beneath the warmth of her home and the gentle hope in her parents' eyes, there was something else forming inside her. A fear of not living up to their belief, a fear of disappointing the people who saw potential where she only saw confusion. A fear that her path, whatever it was, might one day fracture under the weight of expectation. Those early years did not produce a star, they produced sensitivity. They forged the instinct to feel deeply, to notice the invisible, to care almost painfully about the emotional landscapes of others. Meryl's family roots were the soil from which her genius grew, but they were also a reminder that the most extraordinary lives often begin in the most ordinary places. A quiet home, a watchful child, a destiny still asleep beneath the surface. It was not fame she chased, it was understanding. And she learned that understanding begins at home.
Childhood struggles and early influences. Meryl Streep's childhood was not defined by trauma, but by a quieter, more insidious struggle, the battle between confidence and invisibility. Though she grew up in a supportive home, she often felt overshadowed by her own self-doubt, a doubt so subtle that even those closest to her never sensed the storms she carried inside. As a young girl, she discovered that the world responded more kindly when she performed confidence rather than attempted to feel it. So she crafted a persona, bright, composed, almost radiant in its self-assurance. She learned to smile even when she was uncertain. She learned to speak boldly even when she trembled inside. She learned that if she pretended to be perfect, people would treat her as if she were. It was her first role, and it was exhausting. She joined the school choir and for the first time felt the small thrill of applause. But even then, she convinced herself that she didn't deserve it. Praise made her uncomfortable. Compliments felt like someone else's shoes, beautiful, but not meant for her feet. She was terrified people would one day realize she was not as exceptional as they believed. And yet, in the quiet corners of her childhood, signs of her future brilliance flickered. She would stand in front of her mirror and experiment with voices, not out of vanity, but from fascination. She could shift from accents to tones to emotional textures as if she were unlocking doors to rooms no one else could see. It was not performance, it was exploration. Her gift was not theatricality, it was empathy expressed through voice. School was both a haven and a battlefield. She excelled in academics, but not because she was confident, because failure terrified her. She feared that if she fell short even once, the fragile image she created would shatter. Children rarely speak of these fears, but they carry them like small stones in their pockets, always there, always heavy. Her greatest influence was her mother. Mary believed Meryl could do anything. She said it often, said it boldly, said it without hesitation. And while that belief gave Meryl wings, it also made her fear heights. Children often fear failing in ways that would disappoint the people who love them. Meryl feared that deeply. Her mother's confidence became both fuel and pressure. Then came adolescence, a time when the world sharpens its edges. Meryl struggled quietly with her appearance, her identity, her sense of belonging. She felt plain, unremarkable, unworthy of attention. She didn't yet understand that her brilliance lived beneath the surface, waiting for the world to slow down long enough to notice.
Yet influence comes in unexpected shapes. Music, literature, poetry, and drama classes began to form a map inside her, a pull toward storytelling. She felt something stirring, something she could not name yet, something powerful. Her teachers saw it before she did, that spark of depth, that uncanny emotional intelligence. But Meryl, still wrapped in self-doubt, dismissed their praise as exaggeration. The truth was simpler and sadder. She didn't believe she was special. Not yet. Not until she learned that becoming someone else on stage allowed her to escape herself. The stage was not a spotlight. It was a shelter, a place where she could shed the girl who doubted and step into women who didn't. Her childhood struggles carved the emotional valleys that would later allow her to portray some of the most complex characters in film history. Her influences, her mother's belief, her own longing for understanding, her fascination with human behavior, shaped her into an artist whose work would one day touch the world. But for now, she remained a girl standing at the edge of possibility, unaware that she was already gathering the pieces of the legend she would one day become.
Breakthrough moment. By the mid-1970s, Meryl Streep possessed a quiet confidence shaped by discipline, heartbreak, and relentless work. But she was not yet a star. She was simply another young actress in New York, auditioning in cramped rooms, performing for audiences of 20, and hoping someone, anyone, would see what she carried within her. Her breakthrough did not arrive suddenly. It came through a series of small, subtle victories that began to shift the ground beneath her feet. She landed roles in Shakespeare in the Park, where her interpretations began to draw whispers among critics. They sensed something in her presence, an emotional clarity, a kind of spiritual depth that was rare in performers her age. Her voice, her posture, her timing, her intuition, everything felt effortless, though in truth, nothing about her craft was effortless. Then came 1977. Her small but memorable role in Julia marked her film debut, and though she only had a few minutes of screen time, those minutes were enough. She was precise, grounded, intensely alive. Directors began taking notice. Casting agents spoke her name more frequently, and suddenly scripts began arriving on her doorstep, scripts that asked for nuance, weight, intelligence, scripts that required an actress, not a starlet. But the moment that changed everything came with The Deer Hunter in 1978. At first she hesitated. The role was small, emotionally painful, and entangled with the presence of John Cazale, her partner, her love, her anchor. Cazale was gravely ill, and Meryl took the role not for ambition, but to stay close to him. She never imagined the film would become a cultural force or that her performance would carry such devastating resonance. Her portrayal was raw, honest, heartbreaking in its simplicity. She wasn't acting, she was living the emotions she could barely speak aloud. Critics were stunned, audiences were captivated. Something clicked into place. Meryl Streep was no longer a promising newcomer, she was a revelation. And then Kramer versus Kramer in 1979. The role of Joanna Kramer was complex, controversial, emotionally treacherous. Many actresses refused it, fearing backlash, but Meryl took it with quiet determination. She reshaped the character, rewriting dialogue, adding moments of vulnerability that transformed Joanna from a villain into a wounded, misunderstood woman. Her performance was mesmerizing, not dramatic, not theatrical, human. She won her first Academy Award, but more importantly, she carved a new definition of what realism in acting could look like. Every blink, every hesitation, every tremor of her voice carried emotional history. And then came Sophie's Choice, a performance so profound, so soul-shattering, that it changed the trajectory of her legacy forever. To this day,
Critics call it one of the greatest acting performances in cinematic history. She spoke Polish and German fluently within months. She embodied trauma so convincingly that even the crew felt uneasy watching her. She carried the character's grief long after filming ended, unable to shed the weight of Sophie's pain. Her breakthrough was not one moment. It was the accumulation of truth after truth, performance after performance, sacrifice after sacrifice. When the world finally saw her brilliance, they believed she had arrived suddenly. But the truth is quieter. She arrived gradually, through heartbreak, discipline, empathy, and an unwavering devotion to the deepest parts of the human experience. Meryl Streep's breakthrough was not fame. It was recognition that she was not merely an actress, but a vessel for the most painful and beautiful truths of the human soul.
Peak career and golden era. There are moments in an artist's life when everything finally aligned: skill, timing, destiny. And for Meryl Streep, that alignment felt almost otherworldly. The 1980s and 1990s were not just her golden years. They were the years in which she reshaped what Hollywood believed a woman could be. It wasn't fame she chased. It wasn't applause. It was honesty, raw, unpolished truth, delivered through characters who felt more real than the world watching them. By the time Sophie's Choice arrived, Meryl's transformation from gifted newcomer to once-in-a-generation legend was complete. Critics described her performance as transcendent, historic, inhumanly powerful. But inside her, it felt different. She never saw herself as extraordinary. She saw herself as a vessel, an instrument through which pain and beauty traveled. She approached roles like sacred rituals, gentle, reverent, almost spiritual. And whenever she breathed life into a character, audiences felt more than entertained. They felt understood. Through Out of Africa, The Bridges of Madison County, Silkwood, Postcards from the Edge, and dozens more, Meryl proved that emotion was not something to be acted, it was something to be lived. Every trembling breath, every broken whisper, every glance that carried more tragedy than entire monologues, she gave it freely, without vanity, without fear. And in return, the world bowed. What made her golden era so extraordinary wasn't just her skill, it was her radical refusal to fit the mold. At a time when actresses over 40 were quietly pushed aside, Meryl grew louder. She took complex, flawed, brilliant women and placed them at the center of stories that Hollywood would have otherwise ignored. She became a warrior without raising her voice, a rebel without needing to shout. Her peers described her as a mystery, someone who could cry on command and laugh seconds later. Someone who carried oceans of sadness behind eyes that sparkled with humor. Directors trusted her more than they trusted themselves. Writers wrote roles specifically for her. Young actors stood in her presence as though standing before a cathedral. But the truth is, Meryl never thought of herself as the greatest. She saw the cracks long before she saw the shine. She felt the fragility of every performance. She carried anxiety into every rehearsal. And she feared, always feared, that one day the world would wake up and realize she didn't belong on the pedestal they built for her. Yet despite her doubts, she kept giving. She kept breaking herself open to deliver performances that felt like confessions. Her golden era wasn't just a rise to glory. It was a slow, steady surrender to her calling. A surrender that required everything she had, including the parts of her heart she could never get back. At her peak, Meryl Streep did something no actress before or after her has ever done.
She made excellence look effortless and vulnerability look heroic. Her golden era didn't just define her career, it defined an entire generation of storytelling.
Personal life and hidden pain. Behind the brilliance, behind the awards, behind the performances that shaped cinema itself, Meryl Streep carried a quiet sorrow that few ever knew. Fame, for all its glitter, cast shadows long and heavy, and Meryl often found herself walking through them alone. Her life was marked early by a wound she never fully healed from, the sudden death of John Cazale, the man she loved deeply, and the actor who saw something in her before the world did. She was with him through every moment of his illness, watching the light fade from a soul she believed was destined for greatness. Holding his hand as he slipped away left a crack in her heart that would never close. Even after she built a loving family and a peaceful home, a part of her remained frozen in that hospital room, whispering goodbye to the first man who understood her silence. People often saw her as unshakable, calm, elegant, forever composed, but that was only the surface. Beneath it, Meryl wrestled with fears most would never imagine. The fear of failing, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of losing more people she loved. Fame amplified those fears. With every new role came new expectations. With every award came new pressure. And every time she stepped onto a set, she carried the weight of millions who believed she could do no wrong. But she was human, painfully, beautifully human. There were nights she couldn't sleep, nights when her mind replayed old memories, old doubts, nights when applause felt distant and hollow, and she wondered if she had sacrificed too much of her soul to characters who never gave anything back. She loved acting, but acting cost her pieces of herself, pieces she willingly, almost sacrificially, offered to the world. And motherhood, one of the deepest joys of her life, brought its own torment. She worried constantly that she wasn't present enough, that her children bore the cost of her brilliance. She cherished them fiercely, but guilt often sat quietly on her shoulder, reminding her that every role she accepted meant moments she would never get back. She hid her pain well, not out of pride, but out of grace. She didn't want pity. She didn't want admiration for surviving grief or balancing work and family. She wanted to protect the softness inside her, the softness that fueled her artistry, the softness that allowed her to feel what others buried. Yet even in her hidden struggles, Meryl found strength. She poured her grief into her roles. She shaped her sorrow into art. She turned pain into something transcendent, something that touched hearts she would never meet, healed wounds she would never see, and inspired courage in people who needed someone to show them it was okay to feel deeply. Her personal life was not a fairy tale. It was a battleground of joy and heartbreak, triumph and loss, love and fear. But in the end, the pain she carried became part of her genius. It sharpened her empathy. It deepened her performances. It made her human in a world that tried to make her myth. Behind every character she played, behind every award she won, there was always the same quiet truth. Meryl Streep did not rise because she was unbroken.
She rose because she learned to stand beautifully, powerfully, even with cracks in her heart.
Turning point, decline. Every legend faces a moment when the world shifts beneath their feet, and for Meryl Streep, that turning point came slowly, so quietly, in fact, that most people never noticed it happening. Hollywood was changing. The industry she once conquered with grace and depth began craving speed, spectacle, and algorithms over artistry. Roles for women her age grew rarer, thinner, written without the complexity that once defined her work. The world admired her, yes, but it also began to look past her, eager for younger faces, fresher names, louder stories. For the first time in decades, Meryl felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel since the earliest days of her career: irrelevance creeping at the edges of her identity. It wasn't a sharp fall, or a scandal, or a public collapse. No, the decline of Meryl Streep was far more painful. It was subtle. It was the slow ache of watching scripts arrive without the fire they once held. It was the realization that the industry she had shaped no longer shaped itself around her. She could still deliver brilliance, but brilliance was no longer enough. Hollywood had turned its attention toward explosions, universes, franchises, and the quiet power of a single trembling performance no longer dominated the cultural conversation the way it once had. For someone else, this might have meant surrender, but for Meryl, the turning point became something different, a reckoning. She began questioning everything: her purpose, her place, her legacy. She wondered if her career had been a temporary spark in a world that ultimately forgets all its flames. She wondered whether young actresses saw her as a mentor or a relic. She wondered whether the world still needed the kind of truth she offered. And beneath all of this, there was another truth she rarely spoke aloud. She was tired. Decades of emotional excavation had taken a toll. She had poured every heartbreak, every joy, every wound into her work, and now her spirit carried the weight of too many lives lived through characters that never left her. She wasn't broken, just worn. Worn in a way only someone who has given everything could be. Publicly, she remained graceful, smiling, composed, but privately, she wrestled with the kind of existential loneliness that comes from outliving one's golden age. Fame is loud when it arrives, but it fades in whispers, and Meryl felt those whispers every time a younger actress was announced as the next great talent, every time a studio passed her over for a role that once would have been hers without question. But decline is not always tragedy. Sometimes it is transformation. And what looked like an ending from the outside became for Meryl a softer chapter, a space to breathe, to reflect, to rediscover herself not as an actress, not as an icon, but as a woman who had lived through love and loss, hope and despair, triumph and grief. For the first time, she stepped back, not because she had to, but because her heart asked her to. Her turning point was not a fall. It was a release, a quiet surrender to time, to change, to the truth that even legends must eventually step out of the spotlight and learn to exist in shadows that feel like home.
Legacy and meaning. What remains when the applause fades? What lingers when the lights go out? For Meryl Streep, the answer is not fame, not trophies, not headlines. It is something far deeper, far more enduring. Her legacy is emotion carved into film. It is honesty woven into the fabric of storytelling. It is a generation of performers who learned simply by watching her that acting is not pretending, it is feeling, surrendering, breaking open, and trusting that the world will hold your heart
gently. Meryl redefined what it meant to be an actress. Not glamorous decoration, not cinematic adornment, but a force of nature capable of moving audiences without saying a word. She proved that a whisper could be louder than a scream, that a trembling hand could carry more tragedy than a monologue, that truth, raw and unfiltered, was the most powerful tool any performer could wield. Her legacy is not just in the iconic roles she played, but in the doors she pried open for women who came after her. She made age irrelevant. She made complexity necessary. She taught Hollywood that women could lead stories, command narratives, and carry entire worlds on their shoulders. She challenged stereotypes without preaching. She shattered expectations without violence, and she changed the industry without ever needing to shout. But beyond the craft, beyond the technique, beyond the genius, Meryl's true legacy is emotional courage. Through every role, she revealed something fragile about the human soul, something aching and universal. She reminded audiences that vulnerability is not weakness, that grief can be beautiful, that pain can be transformative. Millions saw themselves in her characters because she gave each one a piece of her heart, pieces she never asked back for. And though younger generations may not fully grasp the scale of her influence until years from now, her impact is already etched into the DNA of cinema. Every actress who dares to be raw owes a debt to Meryl. Every filmmaker who chooses depth over spectacle echoes her philosophy. Every audience member who cried because of her has been touched by her gift. Her meaning extends beyond film. She became a cultural anchor during decades of upheaval, a reminder that art still matters, that empathy still matters, that truth still matters. In a world that moves too quickly, she offered stillness. In a world obsessed with perfection, she offered humanity. As her career softened and time slowed her pace, her legacy only grew brighter, more sacred, more undeniable. Because Meryl Streep will never truly leave the screen, not as long as people seek stories that heal, challenge, and inspire. Her films are not just performances, they are emotional landmarks. Her characters are not just roles, they are mirrors. And her legacy is not just artistic, it is deeply, profoundly human. Meryl Streep will be remembered not only as the greatest actress of her era, but as the woman who taught us that the heart, its wounds, its tenderness, its truths, is the most extraordinary instrument an artist can possess.
Closing reflection. In the end, when the lights fade and the echoes of applause dissolve into silence, we return to the core of who Meryl Streep truly is. Not the legend, not the symbol, not the unshakable pillar of cinema, but the woman who stood behind it all. The woman who carried more hearts within her than most of us carry memories. The woman who allowed herself to feel deeply, dangerously, beautifully, even when the world demanded distance and perfection. Her life, in all its brilliance and heartbreak, reminds us that greatness is not measured by trophies or records or headlines. It is measured by courage, by the willingness to walk into the darkest parts of the human experience and emerge with something meaningful to share. It is measured by the quiet strength to endure grief without letting it turn the heart to stone.
by the humility to question your worth, even when the world insists on calling you a legend, and by the grace to keep going, even after the golden years have passed and the world no longer watches with the same wide eyes. Meryl Streep's journey is not a fairy tale, nor is it a tragedy. It is a story woven from the fragile threads that hold us all together: love, loss, doubt, hope, fear, resilience. It is the story of a woman who never set out to become iconic, but became so because she dared to be truthful in a world addicted to illusion. She showed us that vulnerability is power, sensitivity is wisdom, and empathy is a form of bravery few ever master. As she steps into the quieter seasons of her life, her shadow stretches long across the landscape of film, not as a reminder of what once was, but as a guiding light for what still can be. New actors rise, new stories unfold, new generations fall in love with cinema, but the foundation she built remains. Somewhere right now, a young performer is studying her expressions, her restraint, her emotional honesty, trying to understand how one woman could make pain look poetic and silence feel like thunder. And maybe that is her greatest gift. She didn't just act, she awakened something in us. She opened a door to our own hidden feelings and gently invited us to step through. In the soft twilight of her career, Meryl Streep stands not as a fading star, but as a constellation, fixed, eternal, guiding those who look up in search of meaning. Her legacy is stitched into time, her influence whispered through every quiet, vulnerable moment in modern storytelling. Even as she moves further from the limelight, the world continues to orbit around the truths she revealed through her art. So, as we close this chapter, we return to the beginning, the question that shaped her story. What does it mean to truly live? Meryl's life gives us the answer. To live is to feel. To live is to love despite the risk of losing. To live is to give your heart fully, even when the world offers no guarantees. To live is to stand in front of the mirror of your own vulnerability and not look away. Her story, at its deepest and most human level, is a reminder that greatness is not found in being flawless. It is found in being honest, in embracing the cracks, in turning suffering into reflection, and reflection into art. Meryl Streep may one day leave the screen entirely, but the emotional truth she gave us, the truth she carried through decades of brilliance and quiet pain, will outlive us all. She leaves behind not just a legacy, but a lesson. Even legends are human, and it is their humanity, not their perfection, that makes them unforgettable.